All right, everybody. So I thought, you know what? Let's come in and talk a little bit about where this case stands. I saw some comments in here that I thought deserved to have um, a response, and I think there's something important that we need to all be watching in this case, and this is why this case intrigues me so much. Because if you go back and listen to the opening statement in this case, the defense attorney tells you what the strategy is. Okay. And this is, you can tell this is an old hat. He's an old style defense attorney. And I guarantee you, he had a conversation went a little bit like this when this kid comes to him and he says, listen, son, he's telling him about all the concerns he has. He says, listen, son, uh, this ain't like TV. We're going to question everything. When I get done with this case, this jury is going to have so much doubt and so many questions that they're not going to be able to convict you. And that's what this guy is trying to do. Now, a little bit of a different world than probably when this man began practicing law and utilized these tactics, because we have things like surveillance cameras and cell phone data and Snapchat data and things that make a much clearer picture than what this guy is normally accustomed to, at least in his career when he started probably back in the 80s, 90s, and before all that technology was around. And you could go in and simply question the police investigation and question this and question that. But his tactic, his strategy is with every witness, he's going to stand up, he's going to be bombastic, he's going to question every little thing, he's going to question every mistake. And what he's trying to do is say, listen, everything that you have to rely on to convict this young man, there's no physical evidence, there's no DNA evidence, there's nothing but the subjective and opinionated investigation that came from this police department. So if you don't trust these individuals that are testifying, if you don't trust what they're doing, if you think they might have been biased, if you think they could have missed something, then you can't come say beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Tim Herrington is guilty. And that's what he's going to stand up and say. That's why he said at the end of this case, you're not going to be satisfied. That was what he used. So I believe that's exactly what it is. It's the you won't be satisfied defense strategy. So he wants to create and again, in some aspects he's doing it because there are aspects of this investigation that are curious. For instance, how did he clean up things? One of the things that I think he's trying to do in this case is he's trying to paint the picture. On Friday, I believe it was either Friday or I believe it was Friday, they had Friday into Saturday, he had that agent on, right? And he was getting into the schedule this young man had in the morning. So what he's going to argue to the jury is this young man goes out and he's doing all his work obligations. Are you to believe, good people of Mississippi, you good old town folk, church going people, my people, are you really going to believe this young man would have killed somebody and then been going to a customer's house and picking up screws from a truck? You really going to believe that? Come on now. Does that make any sense? That he's driving all over town, that he's going to Walmart, he's running the errands, he's doing all his obligations. Does that strike you as even making any sense? No, it doesn't. That's a question, and that's a reasonable doubt. So that's what he's going after and wanting to set the tone for, because that's a question. Well, you might say, well, wait a minute. He opened the door. He's going to say, well, there was an hour and a half. Do you know for certain Tim Herrington was driving that car? Do we know for certain whether or not maybe Tim Herrington ran from that apartment complex or decided to ride over there and something was going on wherever he was at that he wasn't comfortable with, and he left because he needed to get back because he had errands to run? Of course, one of the problems that the defense can't get away from is he went to go get the box truck before Jay Lee's car leaves the apartment or arrives at the apartment complex to which Tim Herrington is then running from. So that's problematic. In a little bit strange, but with the inference being that he probably was putting the body in the box truck to go do whatever he did with it, wherever he was going with it. But the defense is going to say, listen, can you say for certain? Can you say for certain? Because he said he was going to these screws and things were going to be in the box truck. And that's where he needed to go to the customer's house. So he didn't go get it to move a body. He got it because he was going to go do this. Do you think a man is going to go do what he just did and then will be worrying about taking screws to customers? No, that doesn't make any sense, good people. That's a question. There's no evidence. There's 71 searches and there's not 1 ounce of evidence. There's not 1 iota of DNA. They search his house. There's no sign of a struggle. There's no sign of DNA. There's no sign of nothing. Of course, the thing is there should be a sign of some things because we know there was sexual activity at the house and that there's no sign left of that. So what would that tell you? He probably cleaned up. So some of that's like, yeah, those are questions, but then there's the other side. It's like the things we know. If this was an idea of Tim Herrington was alleged they were never together, they never had anything to do with each other, that might be a little more compelling with that, except for the fact that, guess what? He also has cleaned up all traces of what we know happened at the apartment. So we know this young man was there, right? So the fact that that's not there means he cleaned up. And what are you cleaning up? And why would you be cleaning up? And then of course they raised in the previous detective's testimony the fact that there was this other young man who was nervous. Again, another thing he can argue to the jury that says there's somebody else. There's this young man who was acting strange. His stomach was upset. The police never pursued him. They didn't pursue him because they said his phone was at his house watching porn at 5:58. But we don't know that Jay Lee died at 5:58. What we know is he arrived at Tim Herrington's house at 5:58 with open. We don't know if Jay Lee ever went in there. We don't know if Jay Lee stayed in his car. We don't know what happened at that moment. All we know is there's a message that says open. After that, there's no evidence of anything that happened after that. Besides the fact that we know that Tim Herrington was searching for how to strangle someone right before he arrives. So again, that's a pretty strong inference that says what we think happened. But the idea is this attorney is going to say, there's doubt. How can you say it? You don't get to just assume that's what happened. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that's what happened. And if he can keep the jury doubting the investigation, doubting the investigators that are doing the investigation, pointing holes and doing it, for us, it's like, oh, that doesn't make it, we see this and go, why does that matter? To that jury, down home Mississippi jury, conservative, seems to be church-going crowd that's right in there with much respect for the judge, much respect for this defense attorney, who is also a state representative. Let me tell you something. When he's standing up there and saying that, that's going to resonate with them. And also, you got to remember, these are the folks that are going to be looking and saying, well, you know what? Government's not going to come in on me if they don't have the evidence. I'm not going to convict somebody if the government doesn't hold the evidence, if there's questions about the case. That's what Kevin Horan is trying to do in the case. Is he successful in your opinion? Is he doing it with you? Do you have doubts? For me, I'm in the middle because I think this young man did this. Do I think there's evidence that he did it is a whole nother question. Besides the fact that I think that, yes, from a circumstantial standpoint and the instructions the judge is going to give on circumstantial evidence and the fact that we can infer from certain pieces of evidence to make the leap to beyond a reasonable doubt, is it even reasonable to think that this other individual did this? No, it's not. Is it reasonable to think that Jay Lee was alive after at the time that Tim Herrington is going to get his box truck? I don't think it is, because there's no other contact. Jay Lee's not contacting anybody. And Jay Lee was calling people all the way up to the moment he arrives at Tim Herrington's house, which tells me Jay Lee most likely is dead at that moment. And that's the stuff that when the jury gets back there. But if this is a jury who isn't sophisticated, who doesn't trust electronics, who doesn't trust cell phones, none of that's going to matter. So remember, Tim Harrington's roommate came in here and he said, listen, it's a Mississippi jury. This is a different world down there. These people, this defense attorney knows his people. And I do believe that. It's just like down in the Chloe Driver case where those prosecutors knew Cherokee County and they knew what played. They knew how to cross-examine that witness in a way that took the most credible witness in the courtroom and made her the most least trusted witness in the courtroom because of the things he brought out on cross-examination, like her choice of music, her choice of study, where she went to school, all told a story to that jury to say, this is not somebody we trust in these parts. Just like this jury, if they're old, not trusting of electronics, not trusting of all these things, not trusting of this technology, distrustful of authority, distrustful and specifically really have a lot of respect for the man sitting there next to this young man, who they think to themselves, if Kevin Horn would sit next to him and defend this young man, then there's got to be something wrong with this case. And that's what he brings into the courtroom. For us as independent observers who are unfamiliar with the politics and political landscape of that community, it's hard for us to get into that mind frame and appreciate how this jury may be looking at the case. Now, remember, the jury was brought in from outside the community, too. They were brought in from, I believe, Hattiesburg. And I believe that's a small little community like 200 miles away, too. But they're familiar with who Kevin is because he's well known throughout the state of Mississippi. And again, where they were drawing these people from, I'm sure, again, the profile and who they fit and what they look like and what their background is, it could be problematic when they get back to that jury room. So, very interesting stuff. I'm interested to see what the next witness brings, because right now the state is doing an underwhelming job. We're having to make a lot of leaps and bounds, and I'm waiting for something here to pop off, something really to come off the page here that says that's going to really start making us question things, because I feel like Kevin Horn has to have something up his sleeve, whether it comes out in the defense's case or not. And I thought it might have been the Mattis person on Saturday. I believe it was Saturday when they were getting into that. Because he was cross-examined on Saturday. But we'll see. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, even if he doesn't have the rabbit up his sleeve, the pull out, that's what you're seeing right now. It's the old, and it is. It's almost like throwing everything at the wall. But for him, I think he feels like this is the best approach to the case. He's going to intensely cross-examine everybody, and he's going to make every person who gets up on that witness stand, he's going to try to make them distrust those people as much as they can and raise as many questions about things going on. So that's where we stand. So if you guys are wondering about that, Wendy I appreciate you putting that in there. You were the one that inspired this explanation, because I believe that's exactly what's going on. It's a very sad case. He's doing a heck of a job for sure. He is. I mean, he's a very good attorney, and he reminds me a lot of my dad's courtroom presence, of watching him in the courtroom. And that was how my dad was. He was you did not want to be cross-examined by him. You didn't want to find yourself. He was going to argue everything. The way he came out with the case the other day, where he said, you can't move this case. It was an old case he was arguing. And of course, the judge sidestepped it and said, well, Mr. Horn, it says that all I have to do is make a finding that a jury could find that based on the lack of communication to his mom, the lack of his use of social media when he used to, I could find that a jury could make the assumption that he's dead. Therefore, the state's met that clause, and this case is going to move forward. But that's the stuff that, a lot of attorneys would not even raise that issue, because they would be like, the judge is going to rule against me. Whereas this guy's like, I don't care if I piss the judge off. I'm raising the issue. I'm raising every single issue, because now that the judge had the rule on it, now if this young man gets convicted, it's something that they can look up on appeal, and the appellate court can take it up. So, did the judge make the correct ruling or not? Did he rule on this correctly or not? Was the order followed? And again, the judge decided that that evidence met the standard of direct evidence, and there was another thing that the judge claimed it was going to meet, which is something the appellate court will have to review. But this attorney's doing a heck of a job, and I'm enjoying it. Here we go. We're back, guys.
Ryan